Good afternoon, my name is Camden and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to be doing a part 2 or like a sequel to a video that I did a few months ago, which was reacting to 1-star reviews of some of my favorite books. And in today's video, I'm going to be doing the exact opposite of that, which is reacting to 5-star reviews of some of my least favorite books. As I mentioned in the previous video, I don't talk a lot on my channel about books that I have read previously that are my favorites or my least favorites. So I thought this video would be a good opportunity to kind of walk you through some of my tastes, why I feel that way, and revisit some old arch nemesis. I just want to put a heavy disclaimer at the beginning of this book. These are my opinions and my opinions alone. I don't expect anyone to share them. If I'm talking about one of your favorite books, this is obviously not a reflection on you or your taste. This is just me telling you how I felt. So take everything I say with a grain of salt. So yeah, I hope this video is going to be fun for everyone involved, and let's just hop into the books. I have Goodreads pulled up on my phone here, so I'm going to go through, search some of my least favorite books, and then scroll until I find a 5-star review, read it aloud, let you know my thoughts, whether I agree with certain parts, disagree, my overall feelings, etc. The first book I chose is The Nest by Cynthia Sweeney. This is a book that I read several years ago and really detested. This book follows 4 adult siblings who are leading very, very different lives, but they are all waiting to receive their inheritance. Just before they end up receiving that inheritance though, one of the brothers ends up making a huge mistake which kind of blows it for everybody. And the whole book is just kind of exploring these characters, their dynamics with each other, their lives, where everything went off course. I remember thinking that the concept of this book sounded really promising when I picked it up. I love a wealthy family. I love unlikable characters. I love family dynamics and dysfunction and reading about things like that. But this book just did not do it for me. So anyway, let's see what other reviewers thought, and then I'll let you know my thoughts. Okay, so the first 5-star review I found was from Robin, and she says, ever since Meg Wolitzer's The Interestings and Emma Straub's The Vacationers, I have hungered for another novel of fraught family dynamics with a wee bit of dysfunction, with irritating yet relatable characters, and I was pleased to find it in this debut novel set in New York City. The novel centers around the financial difficulties of 3 siblings after their arrogant brother's foolish accident which drains their inheritance, known as The Nest. Sweeney does a masterful job of narrating the story from multiple viewpoints and having it all come to a satisfying close. I agree with a few Goodreads reviewers who are predicting that this could be the surprise spring bestseller. I do not remember if this one ever became a bestseller, but I personally feel that it would not have deserved it. This one doesn't have a ton of details, and it kind of summed up all of the things that I thought would make this book a standout for me, but just it fell flat, so flat. And I can't say much more than that in response to this review. So anyway, let's keep going and see if anybody else has some good material to work with. The next 5-star review I found is from Michelle, and she says, if Amy Powler and Elizabeth Gilbert blurb your book, you are either very well connected or your publisher really believes in your story. I don't know if this author is connected. I met her briefly at an event we were both signing at, but the publisher should have faith in this one because it's freaking fantastic. Normally, I think if you're using more than 3 to 4 viewpoints, the story doesn't work and it's easy to lose track of the characters. Yes. I don't know how many Sweeney uses, no doubt a dozen or more, but she does it in a truly awe-inspiring fashion. I don't know how she gets away with it, but somehow she does. I predict this is going to be a huge hit when it comes out, and deservedly so. There's nothing I didn't love about this. Like this reviewer mentions, this book has like a dozen or more perspectives to it. You are not just following the siblings, you're following some more distant relatives, and you're also following just people who are like 2 or 3 degrees removed from this family. I think at one point we were following the perspective of a neighbor of one of the siblings' girlfriends or something like that, and I was like, how does this person come into this story at all? Do they really have enough to like offer this story that like warrants them having a few chapters of their own in here. I also felt like our main four protagonists, if you even can call them that, were so predictably written. They felt like they were basically caricatures of different personality types. Like we had the playboy, and he was very stereotypically a playboy. There was nothing that contradicted that stereotype while we're reading his narrative. We had a sassy gay character, the free-spirited author. It all felt very superficial, and like the author didn't have to put a lot of work into developing these characters. We got pages and pages of backstory for each character, but without any real depth to it that really explained the characters' motives or their personality or how they became the way they became. And if you're looking for a book that deals with wealthy, dysfunctional families, I would advise you to look elsewhere to someone that does it better. The next book that I chose is Looker by Laura Sims. This one is described as being a psychological thriller, which right off the bat is totally misrepresenting itself and marketing itself poorly. And I think this book would have had a much higher overall rating if it had gotten into the hands of people who actually knew what they were walking into. This one does have a pretty low rating, so I'm definitely not the only person who feels negatively about this book, but let's go through and find some positive reviews. Okay, the first one I ran into is Irina, and she says, to be fair, I have already watched some people talk about this on booktube and it has a pretty low rating on Goodreads, so my expectations weren't too high to begin with. I think why many readers get disappointed in the book is because at first glance, it leaves an impression that it is a thriller or a mystery, when in reality, it is pure literary fiction that explores one character's development. Exactly. Mismarketing 101. The story follows our main unnamed character as she's slowly sinking down in her madness. Her life is falling apart after many failed IVF attempts and her husband leaving her. She is having a hard time to make peace with the fact that she won't be a mother, even though that is all she ever wanted, and it is even harder to know that her husband, who left her, can have a family with another woman at some point in his life. In her depression, her escape is the hope her new neighbor and famous actress gives her by just living near her. Our main character sees her as someone who she can be friends with and obsessively is trying to make connection, always watching the actress and her children, and even at some point of the story she crosses the line. I understand some people would complain that not much happens in the story, and I would agree with that, but at the same time, I don't think that's a fault. Literary fiction is famous for not having big plot, but big character observation, and this is exactly what this provides. Like Irina mentioned, this book focuses a lot of attention on the fact that this woman has an inability to conceive, how this triggers her hysteria and her obsession and her descent into madness. And it just felt so contrived to me. Obviously, there are some women who are like this, but the thriller genre would have you believe that this is the majority. On top of that, I read this entire book expecting that at some point she's going to kill somebody, she's going to lash out in some way. Nothing big ever happened. Like they said, just kind of a character-driven, character-focused, this woman slowly going off her rocker type deal. And for me, it was just way too slow burn. I stuck around until the very end and I never got the payoff that I wanted. Okay, next. Paul says, I do love me a first-person, present-tense, slow descent into madness. Meticulous and oddly funny, sharply observed, disturbing as hell. I did not find this book funny or disturbing, just mind-numbingly boring. The next book I have is Zenith by Sasha Alsberg and Lindsay Cummings. Sasha Alsberg, if you do not know, is a booktuber, as is Lindsay Cummings, I think. But anyway, they're an author duo. They put out a science fiction novel several years back. It was horrendous. One of the worst books I've ever read. I don't even think they ever finished the series, but maybe I'm wrong. This one apparently does not have a lot of love on Goodreads, so it was a little hard to find a 5-star review. But here we are. High Lady of the Night Court says, I love this book from start to finish, and there is no part of this book I don't like. The sci-fi world is one of the best I have ever read. It is a work of art. Have you read sci-fi before, High Lady? The plot was very elaborate and thought out, the story unravels beautifully, and I was not disappointed by anything. I have been waiting to read this book ever since it was announced, and it flew past all my expectations. The book follows a group of badass female space pirates who make a deal with the dreaded General Cortaz that might result in pardon for all of their crimes, their slates wiped clean. The deal involves a mission that is close to impossible, and it might be the death of them all. The main character in this book, Androma, Lyra, Breck, and Gilly, are amazing people with great personalities and a family-like bond I loved. Even though these people have their strengths and are best at what they do, they are each written in a very realistic way with flaws and weaknesses which make them so much more understandable. Did we read the same book? This book was atrocious. The characters are not great or strong or good at what they do. In fact, almost every plan that they make throughout the book ends up failing because they fail to like think everything through and make a solid plan of attack. And the only reason that they have some minor victories throughout the book is because their enemies are even more incompetent than they are. She describes the world as being one of the best sci-fi worlds she's ever read, but I don't think a single thought was really put into the world building of this novel. When you are creating a sci-fi or a fantasy world, there are really no limits to your creativity. You can let your imagination totally run wild, but every other creature in this book was like humanoid but with scales, or humanoid but red. It just felt so lackluster. Like you could do anything, the world is your oyster. It doesn't have to be humanoid. It could be plants. It could be creatures that walk on all fours. It could be creatures the size of a skyscraper. It could be creatures who don't even breathe air. It could be really anything that you can imagine. It doesn't even have to resemble anything you've ever seen in our world. But there was no complexity to the world. There were no other cultures. There were no other practices. No real effort put into the world building at all. It basically just took our world and our worldview and just slapped a couple varying traits onto other creatures, and that was it. I was so disappointed with the world building in this one, and I would definitely never list it as one of the book's strong suits. Okay, next. Chelsea says 3 words, female space pirates. If that doesn't draw you in, maybe Six of Crows set in space will. This was an immersive read with a fun plot. I love the short chapters because it made it feel like I was getting through this 500-page book faster. I thought the fight scenes and the character development were well done. We get some backstory sprinkled throughout that really made these characters come to life. I liked how the characters had multiple layers to them. They might seem a certain way by other characters, but that doesn't mean that's who they truly are. Yeah, about that. I remember feeling like there was a ton of contradiction with the characters while I was reading this book, and it wasn't a difference between how the character was perceived by other people and how the character felt themselves. It was more of a difference of like how the character was described by the authors or how they felt inside themselves and then their actual actions. So like I remember there was a part where Androma, the main character, who's like the main space pirate leader lady, was saying that she felt so much guilt and she didn't want to be a killer and she wasn't a killer at heart. And then like 2 sentences later, she was like bathing in the blood of her enemies and like releasing like a battle cry. And it just felt like maybe the 2 things like can't go hand in hand. I think this book needed some more experienced authors and a few more rounds of editing. It would have really benefited. Okay, next. The next book that I picked is And the Ocean Was Our Sky by Patrick Ness. This is hands down the weirdest book I have ever read in my entire life. You know how there's that story about how Robert Louis Stevenson was like really sick with a fever and he went to sleep and he had a dream, and that dream was Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and he woke up and he wrote it down. I feel like there is no other explanation for how this book came to be than that it was some type of fever dream that Patrick Ness had. Because I can't really imagine it being anything other than a fever dream that would lead someone to write a role reversal version of Moby Dick, where we're following whales. Literally, this book is following whales who are being hunted by a captain named Toby Wick. Anyway, here are some people's reviews. Monsters are Patrick Ness's expertise, and they come in various shapes and tell stories from different perspectives. In this novel, he lets the whales tell the story of hunting and vengeance that we all know from the unforgettable Captain Ahab. There is a Moby Dick in each society, and if there are people who believe in his power and are willing to turn into a mirror of him in order to fulfill the prophecy of hatred, fight, and exclusive honor. Patrick Ness shows the self-absorbed hunter for fame and the absurdly loyal acolyte and the doubter and the thinker in their timeless roles, but in the shape of whales, not humans. They fight and kill in an eternal vicious cycle of vendetta for their lost lives among their own. A bleak story, but with a sense of hope. The way out of violence is respect for the individual and communication across the enemy's borders. But who can actually do that, trained and drilled in partisanship, taught to think in demonizing patterns, or alone in doubts? Does fear of the devil make him rise? That is the message of this tale. This reviewer made it sound way more interesting than it actually is. In reality, you are following a pod of whales who are hunting a human. Mind you, one of the whales is literally towing a ship behind her, like it's tied to her, which makes absolutely no sense. Why would you need a ship if you're a whale? You don't. You don't need a ship if you're a whale. Anyway, next review. Darcy, who, may I add, shelved this on the best of the best shelf, says, "Holy shit. I really need to make a goddamn intense shelf on Goodreads because this book didn't fit into any others. I haven't read the original Moby Dick, so I don't know how similar this was, but let me tell you that it was definitely different to anything else I've ever read. As per Patrick Ness, it was full of stunning writing, deep meanings, and it really hit hard. It was beautiful and it was horrible, and it made me wonder if humans aren't just devils in real life. The quotes in this book made me gasp, and the drawings were so beautiful they made me pore over them, studying the unique, brilliant style. Thank you, Patrick Ness and Rovina Kai. You absolutely astounded." Here is a point we can agree on. The illustrations were beautiful. Let's leave it at that. Elizabeth says, "Books are so weird. Art in general is like that. I loved this one to pieces, and as I sometimes do, after I finished it, I went straight on Goodreads to read both positive and negative reviews, especially the negative ones, the 1 stars, because of course, how could someone rate this less than 5 stars? Easily. Well, I believe you people. I do believe it was a strange concept, but boy, I loved it so much. I feel like it was so much more than just a story of some whales, than just a retelling. It was a story of how any two groups of people who are pointing fingers at each other, waging war against each other because they think they are different when they are in fact the same. And Toby Wick, I believe, was the product of their own hatred, their mirror, their doing, their fears made flesh." I agree with some of that. I think the concept boiled down like that, of your own fears bringing something into the flesh, and to parties like warring and not really understanding each other or taking the time or bothering to try and make peace. I think that's a great concept. Don't do it with whales and humans. That's weird. Do a Moby Dick retelling, but do it with 2 different cultures. Do it with anything but whales. Okay, the final book that I'm going to talk about today is Lillian Boxfish Takes a Walk by Kathleen Rooney. I rated this one 2-star. All the other ones I rated 1 star. This one was a 2-star because it was slightly better, but I still really did not like this book at all. We are following a 85-year-old woman as she's walking around New York and kind of reminiscing about her younger years and everything that happened in her life. We also kind of watch her as she runs into a lot of people that she knows, or runs into a lot of people in general who she interacts with, and watching her interactions with all of these people. Liz says, "This book, told in Lillian's voice, is pitch perfect. It captures the times, the place, and the woman perfectly. It just felt like I was right in Lillian's head. Lily and I were born 50 plus years apart, but so many of the issues were the same for both of us. But the message here is to enjoy life no matter what it throws at you. As Lillian says, she had it backwards. It wasn't that happiness led to humor, but more that humor could lead, perhaps, to happiness. And it's not as if Lillian had an easy life. She has to quit her beloved job when she gets pregnant, suffers a breakdown, goes through divorce, but she is a survivor. I love that at age 85, Lillian is able to walk more miles than most women half her age. She is a strong character in so many ways. It lent to a whole new level of appreciation when I learned Lillian was based on a real person, Margaret Fishback. Highly recommend this book. I did not know this book was based on a real person. I'm sure Margaret Fishback was a wonderful woman, very accomplished, but to me, Lillian was such an unlikable character, and she was not written to be that way. You were supposed to like her, and you were supposed to root for her, and you're supposed to enjoy her stories. The way that she describes herself is like she is God's gift to humankind. And that's fine. We see a lot of characters who are like very near perfect and who have like a lot of talents and a lot of accomplishments and a lot going for them, and they're strong and they're this and they're that. And we know a lot of people like that in real life. But when you're writing that from first person, it comes off so egotistical to be like, everything about you is great. This woman talks about how she's like #1 in the marketing profession. She talks about how accepting she is, how she loves everyone, how she bounced back from like having a baby and lost all the baby weight in 1 month and was like a perfect mother. She talks about how every guy ever wants her, and like, it was so annoying. Plus, like this reviewer said, she is walking at 85 around the city, and this audiobook, I checked, is 9 hours long. So all I can assume is that this woman is walking around for 9 hours, which is just implausible. Next, Diane says, this novel is a one-woman show with Lillian Boxfish front and center. From her arrival in New York City at the age of 25 until her New Year's Eve walk on the last day of 1984, we get the story of her life and all the things that matter to her. Yes, there is a husband and a son, friends, a satisfying career, all the trappings of a life well lived, along with regrets and setbacks, but we are in Lillian's head on this journey, and I thought it was a wonderful place to be. Let me tell you a few of the things I loved about her. That she was a successful advertising icon in the 1920s and 30s, that she was single and loved being that way, looking at marriage with a cynical eye, that she fell in love and got married, she ate a lot of crow, but did it gladly. What the hell does that mean? That she reluctantly had a child, she instantly fell in love with him too, but realized he could never be her whole world. That she believed civilization was built on civility, but could be vicious when circumstances called for it. That she was funny and smart and brave, that she loved to walk everywhere she went, and that even at age 85, she could still be open to the world and the people that she met. This is definitely one of the books that I feel like I am going to be in the minority. I did not like it, but I think this one can have a lot to offer other readers, and there are a lot of people who would enjoy this book. But for me, I just didn't vibe with this character very well, and this is one of those books where you can't not vibe with the character because she is the only person you meet. She's the only perspective you have. So if you don't like her, you won't like the book. To me, this whole book felt like getting stuck with your least favorite elderly relative and not being able to escape them as they told you their entire life story. And yeah, it didn't work for me, but I can see how it'd work for a lot of other people. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I know I got a little sassy in there, so I hope I didn't talk too much crap on any of your favorite books. If you want to see more content from me, be sure to click the subscribe button so we can keep in touch and you can be notified when I post new videos. I hope you guys enjoyed. I will see you next week with a new video. Goodbye.